What's up, guys? Quick video today just to discuss the recent debacle at the Oscars whereby Will Smith, as I'm sure most of you have seen by now, smacked the shit out of Chris Rock for making a seemingly what was really an innocuous joke about his wife's hair loss. But before we get into it, subscribe and like if you can enjoy this kind of content, along with more corporate finance type videos to come shortly. Now, people are pretty divided on this in the sense there are people that think Will Smith was justified in his response given he talked about his wife and family, and then there's the other side of the spectrum where the response is that Will Smith just went nuclear here and was completely out of line for what was pretty much a very benign joke about what is not at all a life-threatening or severely debilitating condition. Now, right off the bat, I actually thought this was set up, having glanced at the video, but once you saw the full video and the full context and how he was just absolutely losing his marbles at the end of it, saying, you don't talk about me effing wife and all that type of stuff, you realize pretty quickly that he was not joking around and he actually hit the guy. The funny thing is that he actually laughed in the first place, but when he saw that Jada wasn't impressed or whatever it is, that sort of kicked him into gear to sort of stand up for his wife in that respect. Like, a part of me gets his response, and you can clearly see how he emotionally was when he was responding. Like, if my partner, who most people knew was struggling with hair loss, and it was a very sensitive topic for her, got mocked in front of millions of people, then I can kind of wrap my head around the response. But at the end of the day, he committed assault over a joke, and a pretty benign joke at that. Now, there was a whole argument around if you were mocking a male, would you get the same reaction from this? And I can guarantee you 100% if he made fun of The Rock or Jason Statham or whichever bald celebrity there is out there, the response to Will would be far more scathing and much more along the lines of like, it's just a joke, why so serious? I understand that male pattern baldness is far more common and accepted than it is for women going bald, simply due to the fact that it's far more common, and I think beauty and sort of vanity are just not perhaps as valued by men versus women, if that makes sense at all. But there's a pretty obvious double standard here whereby people have somehow managed to wrap their head around and accept the fact that someone literally just got assaulted in front of millions of people because of a joke. Now, I'm sure all of you have seen the video and probably have an opinion on it either way, but I thought it'd be useful to jump into the science behind both Jada's alopecia areata and the more commonly known androgenetic alopecia. Now, I think the real source of backlash against Chris Rock here is that he made fun of Jada's quote-unquote illness being alopecia areata. Now, yes, this is a form of hair loss, but it's not the traditional form of male pattern baldness whereby androgens effectively are miniaturizing your hair follicles. With traditional androgenetic alopecia, it afflicts the vast majority of men with differing levels of severity. But the thing to remember is that it's a completely natural process whereby androgens just simply set off this cascade of events which lead to permanent miniaturization. At the end of the day, it's simply your genetic sensitivity at the follicle to DHT. That's why 5IR inhibitors are so potent at slowing down or reversing hair loss in the vast majority of men. But putting aside the mental health aspects of hair loss for men, there is nothing wrong with hair loss from a broader health standpoint, in that you can live a very healthy life while balding and not have any other health complications. Now, alopecia areata is an autoimmune disorder which can lead to acute hair loss and is much more similar to sort of a stressor-induced hair loss such as telogen effluvium, and this makes it much less predictable in the sense that it doesn't follow the traditional paths of female pattern hair loss or male pattern baldness in terms of progression. It's much more scattered and generally less predictable. Now, typically this is heavily associated with diet, and oftentimes the individual will have to undergo some sort of elimination diet whereby they can sort of methodically add back certain types of food and food groups in order to determine the actual autoimmune response whereby the body's own autoimmune system is attacking its own hair follicle. Perhaps the most prominent example of this, and perhaps erroneously on their part, I'm sure they weren't being malicious at all or trying to be deceptive, other than Jada Smith obviously, was Jordan Peterson. He attributed his hair loss to alopecia areata as opposed to the traditional male pattern baldness. Now, it's not to say that he and his daughter don't have autoimmune issues and their issues haven't been far more serious than a cosmetic issue in hair loss. I think Michaela's had to undergo ankle replacements, knee replacements at a very young age, which is obviously a lot more serious than a cosmetic issue. But from my standpoint, it's pretty clear that Jordan Peterson's hair loss here looks to be pretty traditional androgenetic alopecia rather than alopecia areata, which progresses in a much more diffuse and patchy manner. I'm purely speculating here based on the traditional development of male pattern baldness, of course, but that's just my 2 cents. Now, I know a little bit about autoimmune issues just because I myself have a condition called vitiligo, which is an autoimmune response whereby my body actually destroys pigment-producing cells. So I'm not sure if you guys can tell, but I've got a little bit of a white spot there, sort of like an upside down Eiffel Tower, if that makes any sense. So really prominent examples of this are Winnie Harlow, and there are a lot of successful models that have managed to make something of this disease, but by all accounts, it's very difficult to actually treat, and not everybody responds well to the different types of treatments on offer. Now, because I'm relatively white and pasty to begin with, it's not as prominent or as noticeable, but I have a patch on the side of my face, as we've just gone through, and for the moment, it's under control and being treated with a medication called tacrolimus, which effectively suppresses the autoimmune response, whereby I'm destroying my own pigment. Less than ideal. Now, at the end of the day, if the shoe was on the other foot here and there was a man being made fun of, I've no doubt the vast majority of folks would have little to no issue with the joke. And frankly, I don't think anyone actually took the joke too seriously to begin with. Like, even Will Smith was laughing at the start. Men get made fun of all the time for baldness, and for some it's a massive source of insecurity, given it's the only damn thing from a visual aspect that a male really has any stylistic control over. Yes, I get that hair loss is far less common for women, and frankly, it's great for Jada to shed more light on the issues she's facing, as I'm sure it helps other women out there dealing with the same issues. Much in the same way that there are, guys might look up to The Rock or Jason Statham in helping feel a bit better about balding or coming to terms with it. But frankly, with alopecia areata, there are avenues in order to address it in terms of addressing the issues that are causing the autoimmune response. Compared to male pattern baldness, where you're effectively stuffed unless you're willing to commit to what is effectively lifelong hormone therapy in order to halt the progression of hair loss. There are so many men who have tried finasteride, dutasteride, minoxidil, microneedling, the whole gambit, and still don't get results because they're just so genetically predisposed to hair loss and the progression of hair loss. I knew a guy through rugby who was slick bald by, I think it was 16 or 17. Like, what chance did he have to get on finasteride or a 5-AR inhibitor prior to full maturation? Are you going to sacrifice the full development of your Johnson to keep your hair? Like, that's the trade-off that a lot of people have to deal with at a very young age. It's are you justified in, and can you wrap your head around making that decision? Ultimately, though, like the vast majority of men will respond well to 5-hour inhibitors, but there are very real side effects that can occur, and it's something that the vast majority of men are just going to have to deal with. Like, at the end of the day, what do you guys think? Was Chris Rock out of line with his joke? Was Will Smith out of line with his response? Or was it justified? Because at the end of the day, Chris Rock handled it very well, and I don't know a lot of folks that would have handled it with such class. They're getting cracked in the face in front of a Hollywood audience, in front of millions of people, for what really was a pretty benign joke. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Take care, guys. Bye.